Hey, welcome to the conversation that's as diverse as the dogs that we adore. This is Gun Dogs and Guard Dogs, the ultimate podcast dedicated to talking sense about dogs, with Les Graham and Ross McCarthy. They work with all breeds of dog, but one specialises in gun dogs and the other prefers guard dogs. No flashy trends or social media hype here, just tried and true knowledge that stands the test of time. They bring you valuable insights and honest conversations about the social predator you share your home with. So here we go. About 45 minutes of gun dogs, guard dogs, good dogs, some maybe not so good dogs, and a dash of gossip.
Okay, so we've got a lot to get through today because we are joined by Dr. Lise Hansen, a homeopathic veterinary surgeon, author of the complete book of cat and dog health. Originally qualified, I think, in Copenhagen in '94 and then moved to London and back. And she's joining us today from Denmark. And what we're hoping to discuss, which is why I'm talking quickly because we've got lots to fit in. What we're hoping to discuss is vaccine protocols, because that's always a hot topic. And also talking about neutering in dogs.
Oh, yes,
welcome.
Thank you very much.
So nice to meet you. I think we need to make sure that we've got water here because it's going to get a bit heated.
We're going to get all animated. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.
No, lovely. Just before we delve into that, can you just give us a little overview of you, really, and how you got into sort of from conventional veterinary medicine into sort of a more integrative kind of approach and to kind of where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have this theory that goes for vets and doctors, I think, that when you start training, you have this assumption that you're going to have sick patients and you're going to make them well. You're going to cure disease. And I'm not sure anyone ever claimed this, but I had this very clear image that what I was learning as I was going through vet school was to collate symptoms, to do some tests, to make a diagnosis, which would lead to a treatment, which would cure my patient. Mm-hmm. And then I think most vets or doctors hit a kind of wall after about 3 to 5 years in practice, where you realize that this is not happening. You know, you see the same patients, they come in with the same condition, and you can help them short term. You can alleviate their symptoms, you can manage their disease, but several years down the line, they come back with the same problem. If someone has epilepsy or allergies or, any of those common illnesses in animals or in people, they're still going to have them in 5 years, and you're still going to be treating that patient in 5 years. And that's quite a frustrating realization to get to, that I'm not actually curing, I'm managing. And we respond to that, I think, in different ways, but I was just lucky enough to come across homeopathy and to get to study homeopathy, and that just absolutely blew my mind. And to have worked in the conventional world of medicine and know its strengths and its limitations, and then to discover a form of treatment where you can cure the incurable and where the patient is at the center, where finding out about this patient is what leads you to be able to help them reach a cure is I mean, it's hard to contain the excitement about that. It's absolutely amazing. And also just working, when I started out as a young vet, I was working for the PDSA, and each consultation was 7.5 minutes. So, and it was very stressful, and they were doing statistics after each morning surgery to see how many patients had each vet seen, and were you pulling your weight, and the whole thing was about getting them through the door, getting a diagnosis, doing the treatment, get them out again, next one in no more than 7.5 minutes. And it's not going to be an enjoyable working environment when that's where your mind is the whole time. Rush them through. If they start chatting and telling you, if a dog comes in with a limp and they start talking about, well, we were in the garden and the grandchild was playing football and the dog loves, and you just think, no, we haven't got time for this. Move on. And these days, when I work as a homeopath, a first patient has an hour, And the stories about the animal, the carers telling me what makes their animal unique is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So it's the outcome is much better, and the enjoyment is I mean, it doesn't compare. So sorry, that was a very long answer to a very brief question, but I think in conventional practice that you reach a level of frustration. And either you just accept, well, yeah, I was young and naive once, but now I know better. And of course, you can't really, now I'm a realistic adult and I work in the real world and I make money and I put away the dreams of my youth. Or you find another way. And I'm very, very fortunate that I did.
I think the first time you visit a homeopathic vet, it's a bit mind-blowing, because you're expecting to go to the vet and for them to say, tell me what's going on, and you go, oh well, he's got a sore paw, and then you go to a vet, because the first one I saw was Mark Elliott with a lab, then I saw Edward de Bucala. I think I've pronounced. Do you know Edward?
I do. I think when there's not that many of us, we know each other. Yeah.
So Edward was my local vet. He's
when I
lived down in Wiltshire, and really lucky. And like that, you sit down, the dog just wanders around and it does what it wants, and you watches and you chat and it's completely different. It's a completely different feeling at the vets, isn't it? And then you go back to a conventional vet and everything's like snappy, snappy, snappy. So it is interesting if people haven't been to a homeopathic vet. It's a completely different experience for you and your dog.
And the same as if you're a human medicine, if you go to your GP and you're just being processed and they just want the symptoms and they want to get you out quickly, or you go to a homeopath and they really, really want to know about you and, your problems and how you perceive them. And that can be an enormous relief in itself, just to have the time and to delve into the issues.
I think, like you said, you want to share, I mean, sort of for yourself and for your pet, don't you? You want to have these conversations with the vet, not just part with a whole load of money, which we have to do for a 10-minute consult where you've got to kind of spill your beans quick, sharp.
Yeah.
You want to say the nuances of what's going on with this animal. So, yeah, it's a shame more people don't, I don't know, more vets don't kind of think outside the box or look outside the box a bit.
Do you think it is? And the demand is amazing. I mean, I think all of us vets who work with homeopathy are turning patients away because there's just not enough of us, and the interest is huge. They're very different from when I first started. You just can't take them all in.
I think there's a huge move forward now, whether it's just the kind of industry that we're in or the circle that we're in and what we promote. But there seems to be a lot more movement now towards a kind of more natural, holistic approach to animals, really, to kind of, I guess, health and well-being. So, raw feeding and, all kind of ties in, doesn't it? Just so to move on to kind of the vaccine thing, because vaccines have always been sort of a contentious issue. Because I think, was it 2012, the WSAVA brought out these new guidelines saying that vaccines, potentially last for the life of the dog, minimum of 3 years, and still vets are kind of annual boosters and whatever else. So where are we at with all of that stuff?
I think the main point about vaccines is that we can't just talk about vaccines, and it easily becomes a very polarized debate, with one side saying vaccines are evil, I would never vaccinate, and the other side saying vaccines never hurt anybody. And both are, in my view, so wrong. We have to have a more grown up, informed, nuanced debate about how to use vaccines in the best way for each individual, depending on their health, their lifestyle, where they are on the planet, what their, where do they go, what's their environment, what's their health, what's best for them. But I think one of the big problems in terms of, animals are still, and certainly historically, have been over-vaccinated grossly. You can't compare to humans, and let's leave that one alone. But animals, it's a different situation from the human one. Animals have been over-vaccinated in a crazy way. And all the experts are saying this. This is not a holistic view. This is not something that I, as a homeopath, feel because I'm, prejudiced or inclined that way. The WSAVA, like you said, the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, which is really where the experts are, this global umbrella organization that combines all the national veterinary associations. So it's as conventional as you can get. They decided around the turn of the millennium that we don't know enough about dog vaccines. At that point, it's odd how these topics are just ignored until someone decides to look at them. No one thinks about it. We just do what we do and we don't really give it much thought. And I think in a way that's our biggest enemy, that we just kind of do what we've always done. I think humans by nature are quite conservative, and this is how I've always done it, so I just do it and I don't give it much thought. And the problem in terms of vaccines is that there was kind of a system in place that was quite well established before anyone knew much about vaccines. The only people, or the only organizations, the only ones that had any input into how dogs and cats should be vaccinated, if we go back when I went to vet schools in the 80s, 90s, were the people who made the vaccines. And it was not in their interest to do lifetime studies to see, what is the duration of action of this vaccine. They tested the vaccines for a year. And then they applied for a license to put this vaccine on the market because they had proved that it provided protection for a year. And they said, we can demonstrate that this vaccine gives protection lasting at least a year. So we recommend that you repeat it annually. So that's what everybody did. That was the basis of it, at least a year. And no one looked any further. So, and we just did it.
So just because the testing parameters was a year, that was where the 1 year
that's where
vaccination came from.
Yeah. No one looked any further.
Well, that's an incredibly lucrative decision to make, isn't it? That you need to fabulous for the companies.
And I think the embarrassing part of that is that the rest of us didn't notice that kind of at least a year. I wonder how long it actually lasts for. And I'm as guilty as anyone else. This is just what you did. And we talked about the annual vaccination. And when people say that these days, I break out in hives. There is no such thing as the annual vaccination. Nobody should call it that. It doesn't exist. It's a historical remnant from a time where that's what it said on the license for the vaccine, because nobody had looked any further. So we knew that it gave protection for at least a year, and no one suspected that there could be a problem with vaccines. And that realization came to the veterinary world in the early 1990s, that actually vaccines have side effects and we need to know more about what these are and the best way to vaccinate. And that led to the World Small Animal Veterinary Association putting together a group of experts from around the world, professors teaching at universities around the world who were, who knew the most of anybody about dogs and cats and their immune systems and their response to vaccines. And they published these guidelines. The first ones were in 2007, and there's been a series of updates, but they really read like a conversation where they adjust little bits and delve into different areas, and they are mind-blowing. I mean, absolutely mind-blowing. I remember, it's one of those moments, I remember the chair I was sitting in when I read the first ones and thought, holy shit. I mean, the first global vaccine guidelines say we should aim to vaccinate each animal as little as possible. That's the aim. To be so targeted that without putting them at increased risk, we reduce the number of vaccines giving to each animal. That's why these guidelines are published, so that we don't vaccinate unnecessarily.
And they're published and largely ignored by the veterinary profession. Is that how that rolls? That's how.
It leads to a situation where vets vaccinate very, very differently. And there is this very common perception that there is one way to vaccinate, and of course, wherever we go, they're going to do the same thing because there is an established protocol, and there just really, really isn't. So you've got vets at one end who will say, we've been following the guidelines since the first one came out 18 years ago. We try to avoid the non-core vaccines. We try to test for the core vaccines. We hardly ever vaccinate an adult dog if it's not traveling internationally. And you've got the other side saying, I'm doing what I've been doing for 40 years and never heard anybody, and no one's going to tell me any different. And then you've got a huge spectrum in between where people vaccinate totally randomly, annually, every other year, every third year, every fourth year, just draw it out of a, no scientific basis for it.
What are the, because I think from my perspective, I think vaccines are really good, but over vaccination is very damaging, I suspect. What are the issues with the kind of annual boosters or boostering dogs that don't need to be vaccinated? If they've been vaccinated as a 14-week-old puppy or whatever, and a titer test would show that they still have a strong immunity. What's the risk that we run by pumping these vaccines into our dogs?
Sure. I mean, first I would say I don't think vaccines are good or bad. I think vaccines are a valuable tool that has to be used with insight and care. We have to use them in an informed way, but in themselves they can be life-saving. They can also cost lives. And the WSAVI guidelines are very, very clear that each time an individual is vaccinated, there is a risk of side effects. And those side effects can be short-lived, a bit of sort of general malaise, a slight fever, a soreness at the point of injection, or something that doesn't really matter in the bigger picture, or they can end the life of you can die from a vaccine, and it happens. You get immune reactions, some of them life-threatening. There's a table of, I think it's the 2015 guidelines have a table of side effects from vaccination, and ranging from nothing at all, nothing worth mentioning, to seizures, death, very, very life-threatening disease. So even, if you speak to someone, and I have heard colleagues say, I've been a vet for 30 years and I've never seen, vaccines don't have side effects. I've never seen a side effect. And what they're really saying, what that speech bubble translates to is, I've not read the WSAVA guidelines, and I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm not very observant. So there absolutely is a risk. Each injection given carries a risk, but it can also save someone's life. I mean, as I said before, I worked for the PDSA when I was first in practice, and certainly at that time, I'm not sure how it is today, but the PDSA were only treating sick animals; they weren't vaccinating. So when you're in an area where there's a large population of dogs that are not vaccinated, so that means that we saw a lot of parvo, and it is heartbreaking. The smell just never leaves you of that, the blood in the vomit and the diarrhea, and quite a few of them don't survive. And you sit there holding these puppies that are dying, and that this was absolutely preventable. A single injection, not very dear at all, could have saved their life. And we've known this for ages. Why is this dog dying in my hands? So I think anyone saying, vaccines are bad, I would never vaccinate, it's so damaging. But it's just as wrong as saying vaccines could never give harm. I'll just give, all the vaccines in my fridge to every dog every year. Never hurt anybody. I mean, we need to be more informed about what we do. And we need to know, when we talk about vaccination, we can't be for or against. We have to talk about what vaccines are we talking about, and who's the individual, how old are they, what's their health, where do they live, and then tailor a vaccination protocol that suits that animal.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the leptospirosis vaccine? Because we
took the words right out of my mouth. I was talking at the bit
because we used to have Lepto 2 in the UK, and now the vets won't stop it. We'll have to go to Lepto 4, and also Lepto's one of the ones that, and I'm very happy for you to say, no, I'm completely wrong on this. But we're told that it needs to be done every year because you can't titer test successfully for leptospirosis. But it's something I'm really interested in. I work my dogs on shoots, so they're in water and stuff. So to me, I think the risk, not so much now, but certainly when I was picking up a lot, the risk of lepto was a bit higher than what it is now because of the conditions we're working in. So I'd really like your thoughts on that, Lise, if that's okay, because lepto
No,
is.
absolutely. In that environment of those, your, the people that you know in that environment with hunting dogs, do you know lots of dogs that died from lepto? Like, do you?
No, I don't, but they all vaccinate every year because
Yeah,
that's what we've been told to
yeah,
do.
sure.
And so and certainly like my vet, I don't pick up very often now. My vet has moved across to like a maximum of every 3 years for your vaccines. Once you hit the 3 year, they start sending you reminders to go in and get checked. But the lepto, they say you have to have done every year. And I always
Yeah.
kind of go, and then I say, well, can I titer test for it? Because I want to titer test for the full vaccines. And they say, no, it doesn't really apply to lepto. So that's the one I'm always confused about.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of really important points in there. I mean, the WSAVA, because again, I want to say that I think when it comes to vaccines, you need to tailor the approach and the protocol to each animal, but it's not really a question of what each vet feels or thinks, or it's not a matter of opinion. I don't know anybody that are qualified to argue with the experts who write the WSAVA guidelines. I mean, they are the people who know, and they say, so I really like to say I don't have an opinion as such, but I quote, I've read these reports many, many, many times, and I've had the luck to discuss them with several of the authors, and I refer to them, and they say that to talk about vaccines and dogs, we need to look at the vaccines that are frequently used, and then we need to use them in a way that is safe, but still vaccinates each dog as little as possible. And to that aim, they divide them into two categories: the core vaccines and the non-core vaccines. The core vaccines are and it quickly becomes the core diseases and the core vaccines. I kind of use those words interchangeably because, you give the core vaccines against the core diseases. But the core diseases that all dogs should be protected against are parvovirus, distemper, and hepatitis. Hepatitis is also sometimes called adenovirus. But those are the three ones that all dogs should be protected against, meaning all dogs should have antibodies in their blood against those three diseases to indicate that they are covered. The non-core vaccines, and that's where a lot of confusion happens. The non-core vaccines that are in common use are leptospirosis and kennel cough. And then there are some other kind of, influenza and Lyme disease and some other vaccines that they say we're not even going to discuss those. Forget about those. Just don't do it. But the core vaccines and the non-core vaccines, the non-core vaccines are defined as the vaccines that you should not give routinely. So that means, as a default, you should opt out. They are not for everybody. For most dogs living, certainly in our part of the world, they're not relevant. Either because they don't work or because it's kennel cough and leptospirosis we're talking about when we talk about the non-core vaccines. And kennel cough, they say, it's a harmless disease and it's a bit of a joke of a vaccine because it doesn't really. I mean, I've heard Professor Michael Day, who was the chair of the WSAVA vaccine guideline group from the beginning, say, who here thinks you can vaccinate against the common cold? It's silly to think. Kennel cough isn't one disease, and it's not caused by one agent. And even when you get it, it's not a dangerous thing. So the vaccine is not effective. The disease is not dangerous. Why bother? That's kennel cough. Leptospirosis, what they're saying is it's a deeply ineffective vaccine against a rare disease. And it is also one of the vaccines that carry the highest risk of side effects. So all those things put together, if you catch leptospirosis is, I've been a vet for coming up to 33 years. I've never seen a case. So it's kind of this monster that's someone is trying to sell us a vaccine. This is not what the WS, brother. This is not what they're saying. This is me speaking for a second. I think that there's a marketing campaign going on that taps into people's fear. And they are so successful at this, and they are making us scared of something we've never seen, as if this thing is lurking out there and is out to get our dogs. And sure, if you're in a place, leptospirosis is also a disease that, it's primarily a disease that affects humans. There are more humans catching leptospirosis every year than there are dogs. And one of the arguments when people are trying to sell us the vaccine is that, oh, but you can catch it from your dog. I have searched and searched and searched. I have never found an example of that, of a person catching leptospirosis from their dog. It's the cases that happen in our part of the world. It's crazy situations like heavy rain and flooding, and someone's basement is, sewers, and your way, and it's you need some quite unique factors to come together in a perfect storm. It's a very rare disease, but it's a disease where someone has a product to sell, and fear is a very powerful, it plays on our mind. So we have all these people walking around really scared of something they've never seen. And what the WSA, the guidelines from 2013, I think, that were aimed at, they did a particular version aimed at carers rather than vets. It was like 2 pages long. And it really said, if your vet is pushing for the lepto vaccine, this is what you should ask them. You should ask your vet, how many confirmed cases have you seen here recently? And in almost every situation, the vet will say none, So it's like this, we're worried as if there is an epidemic, but nobody can find out where the cases are. And then you get these rumors, we hear it's on the rise in this area or something, but you can't find a vet who's actually verified a case. So it's like this invisible monster. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It does exist, but it's not as if dogs across the UK are dropping dead from lepto. It really, really isn't. But the rhetoric around it sometimes could give that impression.
Like you were saying about kennel cough, there's like over 250 strains of lepto, isn't there? Leptospirosis.
There's a lot of strains, and that's why I think this debate about whether we give the vaccine that contains 2 of them or whether we give the vaccine that contains 4 of them is like, I think that's an odd thing to worry about. Some studies into side effects from vaccination show that if lepto in any kind of vaccination situation, so where a dog is given a vaccine, whether it's a combo or a single vaccine, there was a huge study. I've got it in front of me. They had 130,000. They went back through the records of lots of veterinary clinics, and there were 130,000 incidents where a dog was vaccinated. And then they looked at how many of these do the owners call back within 5 days and say, my dog is now ill. And then they analyzed what increases the risk of that happening. And of course, this is not a true picture of side effects, because side effects can happen, as they say in the guidelines, weeks or months or years after the vaccine that directly caused them. But even a study that just looks at 5 days after the injection, how many owners call back and said, I think that vaccine made my dog ill, we need to come back and be seen. The risk of that happening increased, doubled if lepto was given. And we know that the side effects primarily happen from killed vaccines, and the killed vaccines in veterinary use for dogs are rabies and leptospirosis. So if you avoid those 2, you go a very long way to avoid your dog being harmed by a vaccine. And we note that the core vaccines are not included in that. The core vaccines they can cause side effects for sure, but they're not killed vaccines, and are not the main culprits. So you have a vaccine that that is against the disease that is not common. It's not very effective because it covers 2 or 4 variants out of loads with no cross protection. It's not very long lived. It only lasts for a year, maybe not even a year. And it carries a high risk of side effects. So it's that you have to weigh that up in each situation.
Yeah. I didn't catch the word you were using before the vaccine. Was it kill or cold?
Killed vaccines, killed.
Killed.
Yeah, that type of vaccines where there's to my understanding, the problem when we see side effects to vaccines is often the adjuvant, the things that are added to vaccines to kind of irritate, that as opposed to kind of provoke the immune system to make sure that they react to the vaccine.
Respond accordingly. Okay.
Yeah. And they are the rabies and the leptospirosis. That's where the side effects happen, and that has been demonstrated. It's twice as likely that your dog will become ill from a vaccine if that vaccine includes leptospirosis.
Is there a difference between, because there's been a lot of controversy around the L4 vaccine, because obviously dogs of all different sizes, Pomeranians and Great Danes have the same vaccine, don't they?
Yeah.
So there's been lots of controversy and lots of people posting in various social media groups and things about the damage and the detrimental effects that L4 has had. Is there, do we know, is there a difference between those two, L2 and L4, or?
To my mind, that's a strange argument to be having, or a strange worry to have. I think the if we go back to the experts, they put leptospirosis firmly in the non-core category, meaning for the average dog, you shouldn't do it. You should consider it if there are specific circumstances that put your dog at risk. Like if it lives in South America, where there are epidemics of leptospirosis, but India as well, there are places where you have tropical climates with a wet season. That's where you really get leptospirosis outbreaks in humans and in animals. And in those places, you may want to opt for the vaccine. It's always a toss-up. What am I most worried about? A vaccine protects against a specific disease, but there is a cost. There is a general cost, or at least a risk strain on your health. And so it's a toss-up. Is the benefit from the vaccine worth the risk? And in the terms of leptospirosis, there are probably situations where the answer is yes. I just not practiced in an area where I could say that at all. But the marketing and the fear and the worry is it's amazing how easily we can be influenced, really, and how they know how to, but there are people selling a product.
We've got, I don't know what it's like there, Lisa, but the thing that prompted the conversation with you was Ross was getting ready to put his dogs into kennels, and I've got the same problem with my kennels as well, and that is they still demand that your dog has full vaccinations in relation to lepto, and some of the kennels will go according to what the council say, and the council say lepto, co-vaccines, and some of them even still say kennel cough, which is ridiculous. But then you've got other areas that say we will go by what your vet says, and if your vet says you need to have lepto, then we're not going to have your dogs in unless you've got all of these vaccinations. And as owners, both me and Ross have to use kennels, but we're not really into, well, we don't like vaccinating, just for the sake of vaccinating. And Ross, you were really stressed before Crufts over
it really bothers me because I don't want to do it, and I hate having my hand forced because I had to go away for 4 days, and I was literally forced to have this Lepto 4, which was absolutely against, because they'll take titer testing for everything else, but obviously, as Lise said, you can't do that for. So have my hand forced, and they're my dogs. I don't want to be stuffing unnecessary chemicals into them, and it really freaks me out. I didn't want to do it, but I did.
And I think you're right to be worried, and I think it's all I can say is it shouldn't happen, and I can only encourage everybody to take the time to try and find other ways. in plenty of time look for kennels that will take them without the leptospirosis, or a vet that will write something that will maybe enable that to happen, or someone who can come and dog sit in your home, or any other. I mean, that will be my advice about rabies and leptospirosis, the two most worrying vaccines, is to just try and be in a situation where you don't have to give them. And for rabies, that means, if your dog doesn't have to travel. I mean, I would go quite far to not have to travel, for a dog not to have to cross a country border, because that's when they need the rabies vaccine, and it's just not good for them.
I had to give my dogs the rabies vaccine. I brought my dogs home with me from New Zealand, and I was so worried about giving them it. I think I was more worried about that than I was about them flying back.
And sometimes that's a good example of a situation. There is no way around that, and sometimes we really have to do that. But to be able to, take your dog to France for 2 weeks or whatever, please leave your dog at home. They're better off at home. That it's worth trying when possible to go out of your way to avoid those two vaccines in most settings. But if you're if you live in an area where leptospirosis is a concern in terms of human health, that means it would also be a concern in terms of animal health. I mean, we're not, we're at risk. There are more human cases than dog cases. But no one's trying to sell us a leptospirosis vaccine. There is a human one. It's not licensed in most places because it's not effective and it's not safe, would be my guess at why it's not licensed or recommended for humans.
Whilst we're on the vaccine topic, can I just ask you? So, I think again the WSAVA they said in their guidelines, and I've not read them for ages, but there's never a case where you would start the vaccine process again. So if you've had your puppy vaccinated, and then you don't have that annual booster or the 3 yearly booster, you decide to have a booster when the dog's 7 or whatever, you shouldn't have to have the double lot again. You shouldn't have to have, and I think vets are still doing that. So my question really is kind of, is that correct? And they shouldn't do that. And the initial puppy vaccines that we start off with, they're done twice, aren't they? Just in case the first lot don't. I mean, it's not.
They're actually done 4 times now if you follow the guidelines. But you're absolutely right, and they're really important points that you're making. That in terms of we do the puppy vaccines first, and those. We should really only be talking about core vaccines then. I would just urge anybody, even if they don't know where their dog is going to live or whether it's going to be, whether they want to give lepto later or whatever, puppies should only have core vaccines. And each pup it only takes one injection to completely protect a pup against the core vaccines. It only ever takes one. One gives full protection. The problem is that puppies get what we call passive immunity through the mother's milk in the colostrum, where they kind of borrows some of her, she's kind of saying, your immune system is immature, you're very fragile and at risk, and until your immune system matures and you can protect yourself, here's some of my antibodies that will protect you for a while. So it's the mother's immune system who made the antibody, and she passes them through to the pup in the colostrum, and they have a shelf life. They will protect that pup if they're exposed to disease for a period. And when we give a vaccine, we give a little bit of disease to stimulate and provoke the individual's immune system so that they can build up protection and they can start making antibodies. But if you vaccinate a pup that still has the mother's antibodies in their system, they will do exactly what they're supposed to do, and they will block the vaccine just like they would block the disease. So vaccinating a pup that's still protected by the mother's antibodies, the vaccine doesn't work. And the problem is that we don't know unless we test, and we can test, but unless we do that, we don't know for each pup exactly when is the moment when the mother's antibodies stop working and the puppy can respond to vaccination. We know that it happens at some point between 8 weeks and we used to say 14 weeks, then they said maybe we should say 16 weeks just to be safe. Now they're saying it's probably more like 20 weeks just to make sure that, the strongest pup that gets the most, maybe born first, biggest, strongest, gets free range at the milk bar with all the colostrum to begin with. Maybe a few of those will actually still have maternal antibodies when they're 20 weeks and therefore not respond to vaccines. No matter how many vaccines you give them, they won't respond until the maternal antibodies are gone. And that's the only reason we vaccinate puppies more than once, is because we don't know. So it's a kind of sort of carpet bombing. Well, one of them will work. We just don't know which one. And we used to say 8 weeks and 12 weeks. Then it became 8 and 14 weeks. Then it became 8, 12, and 16 weeks. Now they're actually saying 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, and 5 to 6 months, just to be safe. But you can, of course, use titer testing, which is the blood test that measures the specific antibodies against the 3 core diseases, which can inform that and reduce the number of vaccines that you give. And again, I think it depends on the situation and it depends on the puppy. If you've got a big, calm, I don't know, Newfoundland or Labrador, or, a pup that lies at the vets and accepts treats and couldn't care less if you take a blood test, then you could say, we're only going to vaccinate this puppy once. So when we get the pup, we're going to take a blood test to see, if we can measure antibodies we can't tell if they're made by the mother or made by the pup, but if they're there, then that pup can't be vaccinated today. It's not going to do anything. So you could, before you even give any vaccines to a puppy, you could do a blood test, and then you can see, oh, there's still antibodies there. Clearly the mother's antibodies are still there, so we can't vaccinate. And then you can take a blood test every 2, 3, 4 weeks until it goes negative. And then, now we can vaccinate this pup. But if you have a whippet,
makes perfect sense to do that rather than just jabbing.
Yeah. And there are countries where they do that. That's just the approach. I was shocked when I first came across this. These were vets in the Netherlands, and they said, well, we don't vaccinate blindly. We make an informed decision. We test in each case. And I thought, but you're taking bloods on tiny puppies. And they were just going, yeah, but it's a skill, and you make a longer consultation, and you have nice treats, and whatever. But I think there are also situations, if you have an 8-week-old whippet that's quite nervous and doesn't like, you don't want to cause a lifelong fear of vets, or it's also an important, more than anybody, it's an important age. And if you have a pup where taking a blood test is actually a really traumatic experience, then maybe it's better to give them an extra shot of a core vaccine, even though you don't know if it's going to protect or not. So I think, again, you need to look at each situation and decide how you want to do it. But I would urge everybody to have a blood test done before you stop. In my mind, all pups should have a titer test at about 6 months, because that's when you've done the puppy vaccines and you just want to check that they've worked. And if you have a positive titer test, then no way can this be the mother's antibodies still. We now know that this pup has responded to vaccination. And the crazy thing is, at that point, if you've got a 5-6 months old pup that has a positive titer test, the assumption should be that this dog is now protected for life and never needs a booster. There's plenty of science to show us that. We expect lifelong protection, but that can be confirmed through a titer test. Yeah.
So listening to you, Lise, what was going through my head as well is the vets say you don't let your dog out until, the second lot of vaccine.
Oh, yeah, that's another good one.
And that's kind of throwing everything out the window, hasn't it? Because if we're expecting the puppies to, most of the litter, for example, if you have a good, strong, fit, healthy litter, not a huge litter, like a 6 or 7 size litter, and they've all, they're from a well-nourished bitch, if you like, so they've got really good milk from her. We should be getting them straight out. Because
I actually think in any situation they should be getting straight out. I don't think there is an argument for isolating a puppy
no,
ever. I
That's
mean,
what we
more
do. That's
pups.
good. That's
Yeah,
what we
I mean
do
that's
straight
yeah,
away.
and no, and I would say never ever under any circumstances in any situation should a puppy be isolated. At the end of the day, there is risk. Life is full of
everywhere.
risk.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I mean, and we just need to make sensible choices. And the risk of a dog, even an unvaccinated 9-week-old puppy, the risk of that pup contracting parvovirus and dying from it is a lot, I mean, enormously smaller than the risk of that pup not being properly socialized, developing fear-based problems, you know, whatever it is, aggression, whatever happens, and be euthanized because of poor behavior.
Yeah.
The latter is far more likely to happen. So if you're weighing up what do we want to protect most, you know, do we want to risk them not being socialized, or we want to risk them catching parvovirus and dying from it? It's a no-brainer. I mean, there is no argument for
Because
isolating a
again,
puppy
vets
ever.
are still saying you keep your dog in the back garden.
I mean, I would say most vets are not. I mean, this is quite
okay. So things have okay.
but I mean, you know, I'm sure you can come across it, but certainly, I mean, even I don't know, 25 years ago, I mean, I've not worked with anyone who said isolate a puppy.
Really, I hear it a bit. Okay.
But sure, if you go back far to say it more clearly, then I would never, ever, ever, ever isolate a pup. And could that
Fantastic.
carry a risk? Sure. But the risk of not doing it is so much bigger.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're worried, then you can test. You know, if you're really lying awake at night and you're carrying your pup around in a, you know, on your arm or in a bag because you're afraid to put them down on the ground because they might sniff and or you're afraid to let them meet other dogs, that's so harmful. And if you're too fearful to put them down and let them meet other dogs and let them sniff and let them go to the park, then you should have the blood test done, do a titer test, and find out if they need a vaccine or not. If you need to know, you can find out. It just costs a blood test, and then you can give them that one shot, and then they will be protected. But I mean, no, puppies should get out and about.
Makes
from the
complete
word go.
sense, doesn't it? So it's just just common sense, isn't it? Of course. Just yeah.
But shielding them and protecting them, and you know, that's just the most unfortunate thing that can possibly happen.
Well,
at
we
that
have we
age.
have. I know you said you don't hear it, Lise, but we have vets in London that say you shouldn't even let your puppy into the garden. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
I
you've
mean,
got
that's madness.
it is
And that's why
We-
I mean we were chatting before you started recording that you know, I'm meeting you for the first time, but straight away you can just feel that shared passion and that desire to spread sound information. And I think that's what it's about. And I think that when we take on a puppy or a kitten for that matter, we take on a huge responsibility. You know, we take on we make decision for someone else. You know, there's an adult capable individual, and we're making their choices for them. So it's really on us to take well-informed choices. And I would love to live in an ideal world where you could just pick a vet at random, you know, whoever's nearest or has good parking or opening hours or prices or whatever, and you just go there and they tell you absolutely what to do. But I have to say, I think that's you just can't do that. You need to live up to the responsibility of taking care of that individual, and what comes with that is is a big word, but I think it's a moral obligation to become informed so that you make your choices. And some of the things that tell you that this is not a person I should listen to is if someone says you need to isolate your pup. I mean, it's just a no-go. If they say that, I can't trust anything else that comes out of their mouth. So I'm not going to come there again.
There are still vets saying it though.
Sure.
There's quite
There are.
huge. Do you think social media, sorry, Russ, do you think social media has made it a lot worse?
I think at the same time, social media has made it a lot worse and a lot better, because there is so much rubbish out there, and sometimes it's hard to see whether the person who's speaking about something, what are their credentials? What do they know? I mean, I can't, some of the Facebook pages and things, I get too frustrated. I can't read it. It's just, there's so much rubbish.
Uh,
But at the same time, it has led to this, it's enabling information to be shared, and it's at least pointing people to some credible sources. And
And I
also the
think,
fact that, yeah, go on, sorry.
sorry, no, I was just going to say, I think also, I mean, doctors and vets up until I suppose fairly recently, we'd always defer to, and oh, yes, whatever you say, oh, yes, you want to vaccinate my dog, of course, carry on. I'll give it this big bag of dry rubbish that you're suggesting. But now I think because of the social media and everything else, and because people are more informed, then we can have conversations, and the vet can't talk to you like you don't know the difference between a dog and a cat. We
Yeah.
have got, because they're our pet, and we have, an obligation, like you said, a moral obligation to ensure we're doing the best for them. But it's very difficult sometimes to have those conversations when they're stuck in this sort of conventional, for want of a better word, but this kind of generic.
mhm.
This is what we do. This is what we do, and it's kind of to fight that tide is quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think that the spread of information has to be a good thing.
Mm,
It's just it becomes sifting through that information and finding out what's madness and what's sound can
mm,
be difficult and overwhelming. And it's not just vets, it's breeders as well. It's all of us. I've always done this, and this is what I always do with my dogs, and they've always been fine. And we're also, I think, all of us become quite defensive about our ways,
yeah.
because we don't want to have done things that weren't good for our patients or our animals, or so we become quite kind of, well, I don't believe that. That's not what I normally do. But there's so much new information in the last, I mean, even just in the last year or two, but certainly in the last decade, there's so much new information available to us, and it doesn't always filter down to what we all do in the real world, which is a real shame. And I
Mm,
think if you have a dog now and the lifestyle of that dog is the same as how you were taking care of your previous dog, then that's probably not an optimal situation,
mm,
because there's just so many new studies, so many new guidelines. We know so much more now than we did 10 years ago, and we should act accordingly.
yeah.
But there is this catch-up phase, which can be quite frustrating, where we know things for a fact, but we keep doing things the old way because habit is a very strong factor for all of us, I
Mm.
think. Um,
Yeah,
so
there's
so
certainly
so
no consistency, is there? Like you said with the vets, because you'd think this information would feed through. Therefore, we're going to change our protocols as of today because we've got this
yeah,
new. But
yeah.
as you said, they don't, and then we're all flailing around in the dark a little bit, thinking, oh, should we do the vaccine? Should we not? And trying
Yeah,
to
yeah, no,
sort things
absolutely. And in my book, I mean, I think the positive side of that, and I think we should look for positives, then the positive side of that is that there are some quite simple questions that can guide you to a vet who stays informed and who's prepared to change their practice according to new information. And whether or not they offer titer testing is one of them.
yeah,
You know, if you have a vet that offers titer testing, then that's probably a vet that's well informed, has read the WSAVA guidelines, are not doing things because they did them that way 20 years ago and they haven't had the time or the inclination to change their ways. So it in a way it becomes easier to pick your vet. You could use feeding. If you show up and say you cook for your dog or you feed your dog raw and they get all hostile, then maybe it's not the place you want to be going to. But I
sure.
think it's also on the owner. It's very easy to go to a random clinic and then go home and bitch about them on the internet, because it's also on the carer of the animal to put a little bit of work into researching where they want to be and pick their vet carefully and be open about their research and their thoughts and how they would like to care for their dog. It's supposed to be a relationship,
Yeah.
and it's on both sides to contribute to that conversation.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's incredibly important to find someone that works with you and practices in a way that, yeah,
Mm.
No,
I
that's
think
great. And
that's
Lise, can you tell us about your book as well? Because we haven't spoken about it at all, but we had a look at it, and it looks amazing because it's covering both conventional and The
Yeah,
holistic.
it's called the Complete Book of Cat and Dog Health. It came out just before COVID, at the end of 2019. And I just found that I was having the same conversations always. And I thought I just want to put what I feel an informed pet parent should know in one place. So it's kind of a book. Maybe it tries to do too much. I don't know, but it's in three sections. And the first section is lifestyle choices. So what we've been talking about here, and I think there are four important lifestyle choices that everybody who cares for a dog or a cat will be making. And sometimes we make those without being conscious that we're making a choice. We just do something because that's what we've always done very often. But everybody who cares for an animal makes a decision, conscious or not, about vaccination, diet, parasite control, and neutering. And those decisions are very, very important. And I would just encourage everybody to make those conscious decisions, to read up on those topics and make sure that you make your own decisions. And this is for, even if you have an animal that's completely healthy, you're making those choices, and they will form their health in a very significant way.
Can I just ask you, sorry, Lee.
No, go on.
Can I just see, people just brought up parasite control. So whilst we're on the topic of these chemicals and things, again, I mean, lots of vets, they have these wellness scheme. I mean, the wellness makes you wellness scheme. Give us X amount of money every month, and we'll keep giving you pills and spot on treatments
And chemicals.
So parasite control, I mean, they go like overkill, don't they? For sure. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and again, that's just not you and I saying that now. The president of the British Veterinary Association I think there's been two sort of public statements in the last year or two urging veterinary surgeons to not blindly treat dogs and cats against its worms and fleas typically, and we're giving them to animals that don't have worms or fleas. And I'm very deliberately trying to avoid the word prevention, but that's often how it's sold. Like it's parasite prevention. You want to prevent worms and you want to prevent fleas, but you're obviously not preventing anything. You're just treating animals that don't have the parasite. And the only thing that happens is that you make a lot of money and you increase the risk that the parasites will develop resistance to the drugs at our disposal. And we impose very toxic chemicals, not only on the pets, but also on the family that lives with them. There's been some really frightening studies showing that you can swab the hands of a pet owner if their pet are being treated with some of these flea products, and it's on us, it's in us. They did tests of children in a Swiss hospital a couple of years ago where they found that they could tell from the blood, the urine, the cerebrospinal fluid from these sick children if they lived in a household with a pet that were receiving these toxic I mean, it's seriously dangerous. They are chemicals that are banned in every other context. They used to be used in farming, agriculture, greenhouses, etc., and they've been completely banned. The only place they're still being used is to treat pets, and I'm sure in 10 years we don't even have these products available to us, and we're going to have to find other ways because they are very toxic. But even the top of the pops in terms of veterinary expertise are actually saying we can't use these this way anymore. And I would absolutely say if your veterinary clinic are trying to sell you one of these loyalty schemes where you get, they will always lead to over-treatment, whether it's vaccines or flea products or wormers or whatever it is. Just don't go for it. In my dream, I mean, I would love to, I mean, if imagine a clinic where the loyalty scheme is teeth tests, every 3 years for adult dogs. Once when the pup is, whatever you want to do during the puppy period, certainly at 6 months, and then every 3 years. Stool samples twice a year, maybe, to test for parasites. That sort of protocol. So
Yeah.
you can imagine a loyalty scheme in the perfect world, but if it's just for products, I would avoid them, and I would avoid clinics that offer them, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd be in for that
Me
loyalty scheme for
too.
sure.
Mm.
So regarding flea and worm treatment for people listening, we treat fleas if the dog gets
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And worms, what would you like a worm count every 6 months, a year, or don't?
I mean, in Scandinavia, routine worming of pets is illegal and has been for as long as I can remember, for
Wow.
environmental reasons.
Yeah.
So as someone who works as a vet between Scandinavia and the UK, it's really interesting to see how much of this is cultural, because in Denmark,
Goodness.
dogs don't get wormed. You can't. As a vet, if someone says, I'd really like to worm my dog, you have to do a test and diagnose worms. Otherwise, as a vet, it's illegal for you to, they're on prescription and you can't do it. You can only do it if there is a problem.
Wow.
And healthy adult dogs don't tend to have worms, and if they get worms, then you treat them. I think that's it. The situations of fleas and intestinal worms is very, very comparable to humans and parasites. We can get worms. Most, if you've had young children, they tend to get worms at some point. The kindergarten children or preschool children get worms, and they get nits. And if they do, we treat them. But that's what we're doing. It's completely comparable. And the only reason it's happening is that someone is really good at selling a product. If someone gets fleas, absolutely use the toxins available to us to get rid of the fleas, exactly the same way you would act if your family or your child gets nits. But you're not going to go around preventing nits by washing their hair in a nit shampoo every Sunday, or preventing worms by giving them a wormer every month. They're probably going to catch both at some point, and then you're going to treat them. And it's the situation for me is totally comparable. It's just that we're buying into it's this thing about habit and this sort of, that's what you do. And sometimes increasingly I find that comparing how we treat animals and how we treat humans and children helps me see things in a more logical, unbiased way, because we are, all of us, I think, we tend to get stuck in, but that we just do that. I don't really know why I do that. That's kind of what I do.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said about fear, because we're all so frightened. The dog might get fleas, and then we might get them. Or do you know what I mean? We're all frightened of everything, aren't we?
Yeah. But and your child might get nits, so you might get nits, and then that's a bore, and then we treat them, and yeah. It's not like
been there, done that.
Well, exactly. But there's no reason to treat them so differently. And the question I get from UK dog carers at the moment, more than any other, is what if I'm not going to worm routinely, what can I do to stop my dog from getting worms? And there is a booming market in herbal supplements and what have you to stop your dog getting worms. And I can only really counter that question with saying, well, what do you do to not get worms? It's that fear that there are worms everywhere and we have to do something to stop them. Well, what's the worst that can happen is your dog gets worms. Most adult dogs don't get worms. Their immunity deals with it, and it's not an issue. But if they were to get worms, you'd see worms, and then you'd give them a worming pill.
I can remember my first Labrador. When he was a puppy, he got worms, and I looked at him and went, "Oh my husband, oh, Bart's got worms," and now I regularly, because I'm like Ross, I raw feed as well. And regularly pick poop and I just open it up and go, yeah, no worms, I'm good. And I don't worm my dogs. And so that's my routine, every now and again, just open the poo bag, split it up, dog's fine. Don't need anything.
And I think in terms of you asked a question a while ago now about testing, stool testing. And I think for pups, I would either worm them just to be on the safe side, or I would do stool testing. But for adult dogs, and this is becoming quite widespread in the UK at the moment, that you test your dog's poo every other month or something because you're not giving wormers, and this is dangerous territory. And I think, again, this is fear-based nonsense. I would either treat a pup or do stool samples for sure, but for adult dogs I would do nothing at all. The same way I don't test my own poo every other month to see if I've got worms. You know,
I'm
gonna
Ross does.
I do it every day. I check.
yeah.
Lise, would you come back on in a few weeks and talk to us about neutering, please?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Can we just talk about neutering in 1 second and say don't
What?
neuter your dog?
Don't
That's all we need to say about neutering. Just don't neuter your dog. And tell everyone you meet on the street with a puppy, you know, we don't neuter dogs anymore. But yeah, absolutely. Neutering is probably the one topic that we really, really need to talk about because the jury is in on that one and not everyone's heard.
I would like to talk about that, and I would also like to include in that kind of the Superlorian implant and that sort of chemical castration. So that would be really fascinating. And I know we've taken up a lot of your time today, so it would be really grateful if you'd come back and have another little chat with us.
Absolutely. Time flies when we get onto these.
It does. For people that want more information about you, Lise, where can they go? Obviously they can go and get your book on Amazon.
They can get my book on Amazon. The book is 20 quid, but it's 14 on Amazon. So it's that's the cheap place to get it if you don't mind Amazon. It's my website is called alternative-vet.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been
thank you for having me.
It's been a joy and it's been really enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You said everything I wanted to hear, so thank you.
You can edit it out anyway if I don't.
we don't edit. I
know, but
we keep it real. Keep it real. Lise, thank you. I really look forward to talking to you about neutering. Hopefully in the not too distant future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. It's not just gun dogs and not just guard dogs, but all things canine, as we hope you have discovered. Please like, share and subscribe and help us spread a bit of common sense back into dog ownership. And a review wouldn't go amiss either. Catch up with Les and Ross again in about 14 days for more canine conversations. Until next time, stay well and enjoy your dogs. Any dog-related questions or topics, just drop an email to talk@cfba.uk or message us via facebook.com/gundogs and guard dogs podcast.